Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Women's Sports Update. I'm Sydney Chan alongside Stacey Collier II, and we're here to start the episode off with one of our favorite topics of all time because it's officially and finally time for women's college basketball. We've got our top 5 players to watch. Now Stacey, I think collectively we've shared the same top 2, but I'm interested to see who you put into that number 1 coveted spot.
Well, let me tell you. UConn's own Paige Beckers. She has to prove that she's healthy, fully healthy.
Right.
She has a lot of pressure on her this year. Not only that she got to prove that she's a National Player of the Year candidate throughout every game, but she's the presumed number 1 overall pick in the 2025 WNBA draft. In order for her to lock in that spot, she has to get back to that 20 to 25 points per game range. And remember, she rivaled for a while Caitlin Clark. So to follow that is immense pressure on her, but I think she can handle it. She's been through the war, so Paige Beckers is my number 1.
No, I absolutely think she's going to be able to live up to that hype and live up to that pressure because we know that she had such a crucial and awesome season when she was a freshman, and obviously she didn't have the best of luck in her second few seasons. She was limited to only 17 games in her sophomore year due to injury and had to be out her entire third year, but she came back strong last year, brought the Huskies to another Final Four appearance, and she wants to do it again. And what I love the most about Paige Beckers is the fact that she has such a versatile play, and that leads to leadership. She can rebound, she can shoot, but she can step in and play every single position. She's one of the best shooting guards in the college game, but she can still be a forward if she needs.
So you got her number 1 on your list?
She's number 2. I'm going to have to go with Juju Watkins, USC sophomore, for my number 1. Mom, this is for you. Trojan fam, Trojan blood all the time. I think Watkins is the player that SC has been looking for to bring their program back to the illustrious days of the 1980s and the 1990s. And when I think of Juju Watkins, I think of a walking bucket. She was the number 1 player and recruit when she was a freshman last season, and she didn't disappoint. She set a new NCAA freshman scoring record with 920 points, including a 51-point highlight reel against Stanford. And speaking of Caitlin Clark, she ended last year as the number 2 top scorer in the country, only behind the WNBA's red-hot rookie, Caitlin Clark.
All right. Well, she's number 2 in the country in score, but she's number 2 on my list.
But she has such an awesome way of playing. She's so physical, she's so crazy, she's so mobile, and she has such a high basketball IQ.
Well, the reason why I have her number 2 versus number 1 where I got Paige Beckers is because I think she still has room to grow. Like you said, she's only a sophomore, and now there's even more pressure on her to be that number 1 in the country. And she also got 2 other teammates on her team that's in the top 50 as far as Wooden players to watch in the women's side of things. So, I think she still got room to grow. She doesn't have to be number 1 this year, but she does have to take, more steps towards being that undisputed number 1 player in the women's college basketball game in her senior year.
I mean, as a 6'2" point guard, she creates problems all the time defensively. Like every time she goes down to the opponent's bucket, she brings at least 2 defenders with her because of how mobile she is, because of how much of a risk she is to that other team. And of course, like you were saying earlier, with new players on that team to help her, I'm so excited to see how she's going to play. Stanford transfer Kiki Iriafen coming on to the Trojans. It's going to be a dynamic duo.
So you have Paige Beckers number 2, right?
Paige Beckers number 2.
Okay.
But let's move into our number 3 because I think this is where our lists start to take divergent paths. I'm interested to see what the rest of your list entails.
All right, number 3 on my list, LSU's own Anissa Morrow.
Okay.
Walking double-double. In her first game
That's
this year, 20 and 10. She always get the rebound. She plays tough. Now, she is sharing the floor with Flau'jae Johnson, but I think, in my personal opinion, I think she's the better player. She just doesn't get that national recognition like Flau'jae gets, with Flau'jae being in music videos with Lil Wayne and everything. But I can't wait to see her and see if she can get LSU back to Elite 8 Final Four status.
Yeah, for me, my number 3 is going to have to be Notre Dame's Hannah Hidalgo. Another sophomore who had another incredible impact as a freshman. Obviously, she had to step into that leadership role so early on, as soon as she got into the South Bend, and prove that she had the amount of composure and maturity on the court. Last season, she won first-team All-American honors, led the Irish to a Sweet 16 run in the NCAA tournament, and was also named the top guard in Division I basketball and led the NCAA in steals. I mean, how can you compete with that?
Yeah, one of one. But speaking of LSU, let me go to my number 4 person on this list, which is Haley Van Lith, who is now at TCU. Ooh, she had some trouble at LSU. Her points per game dipped all the way down to 11. She didn't have an efficient year shooting-wise.
Right.
She got to prove that she still is that player that she was at Louisville, where she would just turn the league up. And also, just like Paige Beckers, this is her final season at college, and she should be a top 10 pick in the WNBA draft in 2025. So she has to get back to that 20 points per game range. And I'm going to be looking for her to do that.
I'm seeing a trend between our lists. You seem to have a lot more of these older players, these veteran players who you think are going to have to live up to their full potential.
Yeah.
But my list consists of a lot of sophomores and juniors who I think are going to be players to watch just because of how much potential I see in them right now and how much people and fans are going to want to continue to follow them as their career continues. Because for me, my number 4 is Iowa State's Audie Crook. She had a huge impact last season. She scored 40 points in the first round of the NCAA tournament against Maryland. And when the former NBA coach and basketball analyst Jeff Van Gundy calls you his favorite player in college basketball, and you are just a college freshman, I mean, that's a pretty big deal. I mean, her strength as a center, she has such a strong interior presence. She's able to drag a lot of defenders off of her fellow teammates to give them better looks on the arc. And as a coach, she's basically exactly what you would want from a center. She has such a delicate touch when she needs to be making up those layups, and she's really, really consistent in the paint.
Okay, I respect that. I respect that number 4.
Thank you.
Yeah, she's number 6 on mine. Because like you said, my list is tailored towards the older college players because they have, this is like their last year.
Right.
They have something to prove. That goes to my number 5 person, AZ Fudd. The biggest thing that she has to prove this year is, can she stay on the floor?
Right.
If she stays on the floor with Paige Beckers, that's going to be a dangerous duo.
That's going to be the backcourt that everybody has been waiting for to see.
And also, I was looking at her projections for the 2025 WNBA draft. She is still projected to be a top 7 pick. But if she don't prove that she can stay on the floor, she don't play majority of the games they are scheduled for, I don't know, maybe she starts to backslide as far as the rankings of eligible drafted players. So she definitely has that pressure on to stay on the floor.
I mean, just like Paige Becker, she did struggle a lot with injuries early on in her career and in her collegiate career. And I'm really looking forward to seeing these two, hopefully, as you were saying, stay on the floor together and be that dominant force that's going to electrify this Huskies basketball team. Now, we're wrapping up shop with my final pick, Oklahoma's Reagan Beers. She was the #1 transfer player this year. She came over from Oregon State, and she's coming to Oklahoma with a lot of accolades behind her name. Again, she led the nation in field goal percentage last year with nearly 67%, and she had the most double-doubles by a freshman in the country while she was at Oregon State with 14. Now, again, she is another dominant center on my list. She's 6'4". She has a very physical style of play, and I think that's going to be really interesting and something that Oklahoma needs on their team this season.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we're wrapping up shop, and we're over here done with our segments. From Stacy Collier II and Sydney Chan, we're going to toss it over to Caitlin and Katie to talk NWSL.
Thank you, Sydney and Stacy. Super exciting stuff talking about women's basketball. But we're here to talk to you about women's soccer, both ACC and pro. I'm Katie.
And I'm Caitlin. And why don't we just get into it, Katie? With November comes playoff time for women's soccer. That means the ACC tournament is in full swing and the NWSL playoffs are not too far behind. This is going to be such an interesting playoffs for both tournaments.
Now, with UNC women's soccer having a new head coach this year, how have things been faring for them in the season so far?
I mean, UNC, they're a great and dominant program. They really haven't skipped a beat since Anson Dorrance left the helm. And in fact, coming into this ACC tournament, they've won 22 of the league's 36 championships. That just goes to show that even with all this adversity that they're facing, this is still a top team. And while they may be ranked number 4th, playing against the #1 seed Duke, I think that they're still going to be one of the top contenders for this title, and I actually think they will end up beating Duke. The history suggests that they have, they don't need luck. They have the history on their side. In fact, they are 12-0-1 all time against Duke and 6-0-1 in the semifinals in the ACC tournament. So while the history does suggest they're going to get the win, and I do think that's going to happen, although Duke is having a phenomenal season. They've been 14-1-1 on the season, one of their best records ever in women's soccer. And this will be actually their third meeting between UNC and Duke on the season. Duke does have 2 victories, but you have to beg the question, third time, is that really going to be the charm for UNC? And I do think it will be the third time charm. It's tough to beat a team 3 times in a row, let alone now when the pressure gets even added.
Absolutely. Now, on the other side of things, Wake Forest and Florida State are going to be up against each other. Now, Wake Forest Kaya Hanks, I thought I saw her having a breakout season this year. Is that true? How valuable has she been? How valuable is she going to have to be in this tournament?
I think the player of the tournament easily can be Kaya Hanks, and she can actually advance Wake Forest past a really good FSU team. I know some people in the studio have their passion towards FSU, but I actually think that Wake Forest will get the victory, and that is because of the play of Kaya Hanks. She's phenomenal. She's been phenomenal this season. She leads the team in goals, and only as a junior as well, which means next season I think she's only going to add to their offense. They've had a really fantastic offense this season, and even though they are 3-7-4 in carry, I think they're still going to have a really great game against FSU. Mm-hmm. They are 11-17-7 in the tournament, but that is going to turn around with this game against Florida State right now. Like I've said, they've had a phenomenal season. This is their 11th appearance in the ACC semifinals, so they do have that experience under their belt, and I think they're actually going to go far and win against Florida State.
Wow, those are some hot takes. Now, moving on, let's go into the NWSL playoffs that we have coming up on us. Now, Chicago's player Sam Stab just got out with a torn Achilles. Who are they going to have to rely on to make it through this playoff season?
Sam Stab has been a huge loss for a number of reasons on the defensive side, but also on the offensive side as well. Having someone that you can rely on, because in this game against Orlando, I don't think the Red Stars are going to have that many chances against Orlando. I really don't. Orlando is such a dominant team, and they're going to flood balls into the box. So I think when Chicago gets set pieces, they're going to have to rely on some of their taller defenders. And without the presence of Sam Stab, I just don't think they're really going to score goals. They haven't really scored that many goals throughout this season. In fact, they've conceded the second most goals in all playoff teams coming into the tournament. So I do think that they're also going to have to rely on Alyssa Nair. She's going to see so many shots, and she's going to have to put the team on her back. She's an experienced NWSL player, and especially with the U.S. women's national team, she's going to have to put the team on her back, carry the load, and kind of make sure that the likes of Marta or Barbara Banda don't get in behind the Chicago defense or exploit the spaces. Orlando does a fantastic job of isolating outside backs and creating 1v1 chances. So I think if Orlando does that, it's game over for the Red Stars. But I think that Orlando will get the victory in this game.
All right, now, Caitlin, the $1 million question. We're down to 8 teams. Who do you have winning the NWSL playoffs?
This might be a controversial pick, but I'm going with the Kansas City Current to win the NWSL playoffs. They're the number 4 seed, so they don't have the pressure like Orlando and maybe Gotham does, especially being reigning champions from last season. Yeah. And I think Kansas City Current, they've got Team Wachowinga. She has broken the NWSL record for most goals scored in a season with 20 goals. That is a phenomenal achievement, so I think she's going to be their player to carry them and advance them into the next level. And I think with Vlatko and Danovsky, they've completely done a 360 on their season as well. Last season they finished 11th, season they finished 4th. That's remarkable. To have the same caliber of players, you've come back, set up a new system, and still get the same results pretty expediently, I think they're going to be the NWSL champs.
It's an interesting take. We'll have to see how things go. That'll have to wrap it up for us here on Women's Sports Update. We'll be back next week. I'm Katie.
I'm Caitlin. Have a good night.